Tonight, new charges against the football coach at the centre of the abuse scandal. Barry Burnell, the former youth coach, now faces 8 charges of sexual assault against a boy under 14. As 7 police forces investigate claims of abuse, alleged victims say they're finally being heard.
They've had to act on it, and I think we're all happy that we're making progress.
And tonight, one of world football's top officials tells ITV News the scandal could hit the game worldwide.
Also on the programme, the plane crash that wipes out a top Brazilian football team.
The terrifying road rage attack on a major motorway being investigated by police.
And calls to clamp down on rent-to-own retailers charging high-cost credit.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mark Austin and Ranveer Singh.
Good evening. The police investigation into sexual abuse in professional football took a significant step forward this evening. The former youth coach, Barry Burnell, has been charged with 8 offences of sexual assault against a boy under the age of 14. 7 police forces are now investigating alleged historical abuse within the game.
The head of the English FA says he can't remember a bigger crisis. And in a moment, a top FIFA official tells us she fears it could be a global problem in the sport. But first, here's our sports correspondent, Ian Payne.
The news of charges against Barry Burnell have come within the last hour and a half. A statement said the Crown Prosecution Service received a file of evidence from Cheshire Police relating to allegations of non-recent child sexual abuse involving a former football coach, Barry Burnell. Following a review of the evidence, Mr Burnell, 62, has today been charged with 8 offences of sexual assault against a boy under the age of 14. For many of those who've made allegations of historical child abuse in football, the week's events have brought relief that their stories are now being investigated.
I'm pretty sure that they've covered things up, but obviously there's no room to hide now. This has come out, and thanks to you guys, it's not going away. So they've had to act on it, and I think we're all happy that we're making progress.
And tonight there have been 2 more separate developments, with another footballer coming forward claiming he was the victim of abuse. Former Northern Ireland international Mark Williams said he couldn't watch his former teammates suffer alone. And 2 more police forces have revealed they're investigating claims today. Cambridgeshire and Police Scotland now bringing the total involved to 7. At the FA's headquarters today, the chairman of the sports governing body said it was becoming one of the worst crises in their history.
I think it's certainly the biggest one I can remember. I think the moral consequences of failing to deal with some of these issues in the past, we must get to the bottom of. We've got an inquiry led by an external QC.
Are you worried that this is still going on, or do you think the game is clean now in this respect?
I don't think we can ever say things are clean, because our job is to be paranoid about the safety of children in our game. Every year we need to assume bad things are happening and make sure our processes and our training and our investment is as good as it can be. And we do that every year, overseen by the NSPCC, and you'll never see complacency at the FA.
And to emphasise how big this has become, the NSPCC helpline that's been set up has now received 250 reports in the first week. As for Barry Burnell, he'll appear in court next month. Ian Payne, ITV News, Wembley.
Well, our correspondent Ben Chapman is outside Crewe Alexandra Football Club, where Burnell used to be a coach. And Ben, what more can you tell us about these charges?
Well, we know that over the last week, Cheshire Police has been investigating new allegations against Barry Burnell during his time here as a youth coach. But what we've been told this evening is that Cheshire Police actually handed a file of evidence to the Crown Prosecution Service on the 27th of September, so more than 2 months ago, well before the players that we've heard from came forward to tell their stories publicly. And it is that file of evidence which has led to the 8 charges tonight. We understand the alleged offences took place between 1981 and 1985, when Burnell was associated not just with Crewe Alexandra in that period, but also Manchester City. What we've also been told tonight is that Barry Bennell has been discharged from hospital today following that incident on Friday night when he was found unconscious in Stevenage and taken to hospital. He will now appear before magistrates in South Cheshire on the 14th of December to answer these new charges.
All right, Ben, thank you very much indeed.
ITV News has learnt that the former England, Spurs and Liverpool player Paul Stewart met today with Greater Manchester Police detectives investigating claims he was abused as an 11-year-old. Our correspondent Peter Smith is at Greater Manchester Police headquarters for us tonight. And Peter, I know you've been speaking to Mr Stewart. What did he tell you?
Well, Paul Stewart has waived his right to anonymity to speak about how he was abused as a child playing youth football in the northwest of England. He said he was abused almost every day over a period of years. And today, as part of their investigation, Greater Manchester Police visited this former England international at his home, and he gave them a name of his abuser. He gave them the name of his abuser, and it's my understanding that this was not Barry Bennell. This was another man who he is accused of abusing him while he was a youth footballer. After his interview with police, I went to see him, and this is what he had to say.
My abuser has not been named yet, and that has been done for legal reasons. Today I've spoken to the police who have opened a formal investigation surrounding this abuser.
As a result of what you've told them?
As a result of my interview this morning.
So this is Paul Stewart has given Greater Manchester Police the name of his abuser. They are now following up on that. It's only been 24 hours since Greater Manchester Police launched their investigation into allegations of historic child abuse in youth football in the northwest of England. They say they've already had a volume of calls, and in Paul Stewart's word, he says this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Peter Smith, thank you.
FIFA's Secretary-General has told ITV News the growing revelations of historical sex abuse in British football could now easily spread around the world. She says she stands ready to support any victims who come forward in the UK or elsewhere, and is also ready to take strong action against the abusers. Our sports editor Steve Scott reports from FIFA headquarters in Zurich.
The scandal began when footballers who'd played professionally in the lower leagues broke their silence. Then came the youth players whose dreams were destroyed by the man who, at the time, promised them success. But it also drew in the game's elite, boys who went on to become Premier League stars and England internationals. Today, from the top of the game, an offer of support. FIFA's Secretary-General told me she is closely monitoring each harrowing development in the UK.
We are ready to also provide support to the FAs in case of request, but definitely we are very concerned about the allegation of child abuse in the world of football, which normally should be the safest place for the children.
And do you think this problem exists around the world, in every country?
Well, I will certainly say yes, but maybe the visibility and the publicity around this event will also trigger more reaction around the world. And we should be very open to really listening to those who have suffered all this treatment, not only give them the psychological support that they deserve, but also impose very, very strong sanction against those who have really committed those crimes.
In less than 2 weeks, the courage of one man revealing his painful secret has not only shaken the foundations of the British game, but is also causing reverberations through world football 30 years after his suffering began. Steve Scott, ITV News, Zurich.
And there is one other development related to the football abuse story to bring you, that the former darts world champion Eric Bristow has been dropped by Sky Sports and has had his public appearances cancelled. Bristow suggested on social media that the victims were wimps and not proper men. That's a quote. Steve Walters, one of the footballers to have come forward, said he was disgusted by Bristow's remarks.
Let's move on to the rest of the day's news now. And South America's Football Federation has suspended all games across the continent after a plane carrying a Brazilian team crashed, killing almost everyone on board.
The team from the small town of Chapeco was having a fairy tale season and was flying from Sao Paulo via Bolivia to Colombia to compete in its biggest ever match, the South America Cup final. 75 players, coaches and journalists died in the crash on the approach to Medellin. There are just 6 survivors. Neil Connery has the latest.
On a hillside near the Colombian city of Medellin, the wreckage of a flight which had begun with so much hope but ended in tragedy. The British Aerospace plane was chartered by a top Brazilian football team and was carrying 81 people. Among those killed, players and staff from the Chapecoense club. Police say there were a handful of survivors, among them 2 of the club's players, along with a journalist and one of the flight crew. This was the Chapecoense squad just before takeoff. They were heading for the biggest match in the club's history, to play in one of South America's most important competitions. On an earlier flight yesterday, the players' excitement was clear to see. This small club entered Brazil's top division for the first time 2 years ago. In the wake of the crash, the South American Football Confederation has now said it's suspending all activities as a mark of respect. An inquiry into the crash is now underway. A team of British air accident investigators is heading to Colombia to assist the authorities. In Brazil, flags at the country's Football Association headquarters are flying at half-mast as the impact of this tragedy is felt across the football world. Real Madrid held a minute's silence in memory of the victims. Manchester United, a club which lost players and officials in the Munich air disaster in 1958, tweeted that their thoughts were with all those affected by the Colombian tragedy. At Chapecoense's ground, fans gathered and prayed for the victims. At the crash site in Colombia, work has resumed to retrieve the bodies of those killed. Neil Connery, ITV News.
The Red Cross says 20,000 people have fled their homes in eastern Aleppo in less than 48 hours after intense attacks on the rebel-held part of the city. The United Nations says thousands more are likely to flee if President Assad's attempts to defeat the city's rebels for good continue over the coming days.
Here, the government has spent the day denying that Britain's goal in Brexit negotiations is to have its cake and eat it. That embarrassing phrase, and more, was spotted in notes being carried out of a Downing Street meeting. Our political correspondent Paul Brand is there. And Paul, clearly this is causing some awkwardness for the government right across the EU.
Yeah, absolutely. If the government does want to have its cake and eat it, well, that is only making our European friends even more determined to make sure we get the smallest slice possible. Several countries clearly unimpressed today with what was in these notes photographed here in Downing Street yesterday. They were jotted down by an aide to the Conservative MP Mark Field, who came for a meeting at the Brexit department just a little bit further down the road here. And in those notes, she wrote that the model for Brexit was for Britain to have cake and eat it, although she went on to write that it was unlikely we'd get access to the single market. And that second point certainly chimes with the reaction from European leaders today. The Luxembourg Prime Minister sarcastically saying, for example, Britain wanted to have its cake, eat it and get a smile from the baker. The Maltese Prime Minister said that Britain would be worse off due to Brexit.
We, for one, want a fair deal for the United Kingdom, but it cannot be a superior deal to what membership is. It has to be inferior to what membership is.
Well, Number 10 is still insisting tonight that these notes weren't made by a government official. They don't reflect government policy. And when I finally caught up with Mark Field today, he seemed pretty irritated by the whole story, told me in no uncertain terms that he wasn't going to comment. But while the government says it will not provide a running commentary on Brexit, it does seem that accidentally one has walked its way up Downing Street.
Right, and I gather that Theresa May has had a conversation with President-elect Trump today.
Yeah, absolutely. The second phone call between the Prime Minister and the President-elect, a little bit scant on detail, which suggests that perhaps the special relationship is still sort of warming up. But interestingly, they did discuss NATO, something that the President-elect has been pretty sceptical about in the past. The pair agreed that all nations, all members of NATO, should spend 2% of their national income on defence. They also agreed to meet at the earliest possible opportunity, hopefully a little earlier than that first call when Theresa May was a little way down the list.
OK, Paul, thank you very much indeed.
Shocking CCTV footage has been released by police investigating a violent road rage attack on the M62 near Manchester. A minor traffic accident between two lorries escalated when one of the drivers attacked the other, then rammed a vehicle and smashed a window with a spade. Rebecca Barry reports.
It's the hard shoulder of the M62 motorway near Manchester, and there's been an accident. The drivers have got out to swap details. But soon, things get violent. A scuffle just feet away from the fast-moving motorway traffic. And it doesn't stop there. The man in yellow gets into his pickup truck and does this. He reverses at such speed the lorry is shunted backwards. But he's not done yet. This seems the definition of road rage. The men in the lorry are probably hoping it's all over. It's not. All this over a motorway collision. Greater Manchester Police say the driver and the passenger in the lorry were just trying to get on with their day's work when they collided with the man in the pickup truck. No one could have anticipated the level of violence they would then fall victim to. Miraculously, the men in the lorry weren't seriously injured. The police have released this footage in the hope someone might recognise the man who did this. Rebecca Barry, ITV News.
The telecoms regulator Ofcom has ordered BT to split from its Openreach business, which controls the UK's entire broadband network. The watchdog said they are concerned about competition and wants to boost the rollout of superfast broadband. Ofcom will now trigger formal proceedings with the European Commission to force a legal separation.
London Underground workers have voted to go on strike in a row over ticket office closures, jobs and safety. Their union says abuse against staff has increased sharply since the latest wave of office closures.
Now, the Financial Services Watchdog has said it will consider capping the amount rent-to-buy firms can charge. Citizens Advice have called for the cap, saying customers can end up paying 3 times the value of the appliances they're renting.
The charity wants a limit similar to one introduced on payday lenders 2 years ago. Here's our consumer editor, Chris Choi.
We're making life a little bit easier by giving you the things you need right now.
If you can't afford to buy household goods outright, there is an alternative known as rent-to-own.
You can switch your sofa to something more stylish.
Firms allow you to spread the cost through weekly payments, but the way it can all add up can lead to eye-watering interest rates like this.
Over the last few years, I've had the cooker, the washing machine, this freezer and that fridge freezer. I even joked once and said, what are they, gold-plated, you know?
Dawn North from Port Talbot regrets buying this way.
And I can't even go and buy second-hand because I would have to go somewhere else to get the money, and I would end up paying interest on that money to buy what I wanted.
At the biggest of these firms, Bright House, we found the cheapest washing machine on sale today was a Hoover with basic price £412.13, but the customer could pay £819, made up of weekly payments of £5.25 for 156 weeks at 69.9% APR. We found the same appliance on sale elsewhere at around £290 without credit. Bright House says it checks affordability, that people can cancel agreements and that appliances will be fixed or replaced if there are problems. But consumer campaigners worry about costs like this and want firms regulated the way payday lenders are.
We'd like to see a cap applied to all high-cost credit and particularly these companies so people know what they're in for and they haven't got this extended debt that they can't afford to repay.
No deposit needed.
This is a sector that has doubled over 5 years. Their customers may struggle for money, but for the firms, times have been good. Well, these customers don't have easy access to bank loans, credit or savings. So the firms rightly say that this is the only way some families can buy household appliances and furniture, and that a single, transparent weekly payment is valued. But according to consumer groups, the desperation of consumers who can't easily shop around can be exploited. Campaigners say that too often those with the least money end up paying the most.
All right, thanks for that, Chris. And to find out your rights when using a rent-to-own service, go to our website, itv.com/news.
Now some sport. England's cricketers have lost the third test against India in Mohali. India are now 2-up in the 5-match series. The tourists were bowled out for 236, setting India a target of 103, which they achieved in 20 overs.
Not great. Finally, the mild autumn enjoyed by most of Britain, up until the current cold snap at least, has actually put in danger one of the country's favourite wild animals. Hedgehog sanctuaries say they're being inundated with baby hedgehogs born much later in the season than normal.
It's left them potentially too young and undernourished to survive the winter. Rupert Evelyn has been to one sanctuary to see what they're doing to help the hoglets.
Numbers may be declining in the wild, but hedgehog sanctuaries are inundated with them. Here in South Gloucestershire, all bar one of the 50 cages are inhabited by young or vulnerable hedgehogs, with more being rescued and brought in every day.
Mum's probably gone into hibernation sooner, and she's left her hoglets behind. And so the hoglets are without mum, they're without milk, they're without food, they're stressed.
With frost biting earlier than normal this year, the hedgehogs are thought to be struggling. And across the country, centres are reporting an increase in new admissions. Most will only need to stay a short while as they put on enough weight to ensure they're strong enough to survive outside and hibernate through the winter.
If you put it on your hand and the hedgehog overlaps your hand, then it's probably big enough. But if it's smaller than that, it probably is underweight. The other thing is also, I always say that a hedgehog needs a Dawn French type of bottom and not a Victoria Beckham one. So it needs to be big and it needs to be rounded. If it looks pinched and thin, then it's not finding enough food at this time of year.
The hedgehog population is now fewer than 1 million. 60 years ago, it was 36 million. The species is threatened, and this popular creature is increasingly dependent on rescue centres to keep it healthy. Rupert Evelyn, ITV News, South Gloucestershire.
Hoglets, did you know that?
No, I did not. I told you.
No, that's it. Nina's here at 10.
See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.